Yeah. Outside, I know a lot of people are weary of family businesses, but because of the dynamics and because of the fallout, but at the same time, it's like, it's you against the world. And who better to be against the world than with your family? If you come from a family that is connected.
Hello, my dear cousin. It's so great to be here today with you again.
Let me tell you, man, it's another episode of the Legacy Podcast.
Franklin, this has been going so well. I absolutely get up every day thinking, when are we going to film again? But, the importance of this is the fact that we have a story to tell. And that gets me really excited.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing for me is because this is about Milo, who I never met, every time we have another guest on, I'm learning so much about our family. I now understand why Felicity only likes to wear dresses.
Oh, she's such a girly girl. So I want to tell you something. When I look back at where we are and you look at where Felicity is, who's only three?
4.
She's 4 now. And you look at myself, and we're just one generation separated. I'm not going to say what my age is, but you look at what our grandparents, our forebears, have created over these 5 generations of building businesses, of imparting knowledge, of just encouraging us to be all that we are, to reach self-actualization. Today, coming here. And we're talking with another family, Bahamian family that is, that are also building generational businesses.
Absolutely. And they have the most incredible brand. Louis and Steen's Coffees. I think everybody in the Bahamas now must know of Louis and Steen's Coffees. Come out of nowhere. I know that everybody thinks of the big brands when it comes to coffee, but I'm a personal customer of Louis and Steen's. I'm sure you are as well.
Absolutely.
And Eugenia, she just loves the place. The only thing is in the far west. So my only plug from this podcast before we introduce our guest is one in the east would really make
absolutely. But I'll tell you, the great thing is they really didn't come from just out of anywhere, because we got to introduce them because they're a dynamic family.
For sure.
But when you think about the values that we espouse as a family, education.
Yep.
This Russell family that we're going to be talking to today, the foundation of much of what they did is what the grandmother did. And that was early education.
Absolutely.
And so you see why we have such brilliance in them today.
So Loretta, before you go to the guests, I'm going to let you introduce the guests. We just want to thank our sponsors, of course, the Echo here at Bahama, who provide this incredible venue for us to host these episodes, and of course the Butler Legacy Foundation, who continues to sponsor the work of this podcast. And so Loretta, now that we thanked our sponsor, I'm going to turn it over to you to put a name to the faces.
Well, thank you very much. And I love this space, so thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we're pleased to have today as our guest, the Russell family. And I must tell you, they hail from a geographical area of New Providence called the Valley. So anyone knows about the history of Nassau, New Providence, the Valley. And of course, so we have with us today, we have Mrs. Joyce Russell, we have Mr. Larry Russell, the son of the late Annie Russell, who was the most amazing preschool teacher. I think everybody of significance who came up through the Valley went to Annie Russell's preschool. And of course, we have their next generation, Quinn Russell, the son of Joyce and Larry. And so I'd like to introduce you all. And as I said off camera, you all, not only are you successful, you're a good-looking family.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we want to welcome you to this Butler Legacy Podcast, Quinn, Larry, and of course, Joyce. We're just delighted to have you with us. And we're going to talk a little bit about, families in business. You guys have come to Nassau with this brand, Louis. And tell us a little bit about how you guys started in business as a family.
Okay. Well, it's an honor to be a part of this podcast and involved with the Butler family, which has been a legacy. The brand Louis and Steen came over a 25-year period. this is something that my wife, Joyce, had in her spirit, wanting to get into our own business in the Bahamas. Joyce came from a family business. And I'll let her talk about her family business.
Well, for me, I grew up in a family business.
Okay.
I would say from about the age of 6 years old. My father worked at a brick factory in Louisiana, Hammond, Louisiana, and my mother was a school teacher. And they lived very minimally. It was 5 of us. Well, at the time, it was 4. And they saved. They worked very hard, and they saved. And so at a certain point, when they had enough, they were able to purchase some property that had a little wooden shack on it in a black community.
Okay.
It was owned by a white landlord, and he rented this little wooden shack out to a black lady, and they called, what she did, she ran what they call a sweet shop. I don't know if a sweet shop is something that you know of in the Bahamas, but that we had sweet shops in a community in Louisiana. And so he purchased that, and so then he became the landlord. But he continued to work at the brickyard, and my mother continued to teach. They continued to save. And so at a certain point, again, they had enough money, and so he allowed, this lady to continue her business there. Okay. But then at a certain point, he came, left the brick factory, and came in to that community and built the first grocery store owned by a black man.
Awesome story.
Wow.
You don't know how that ties in so much with the history of Sir Milo.
So many
I mean,
parallels.
the women influencing the move, Sir Milo's mother.
Yes.
And then creating the grocery store.
Yep.
What parallels?
Yes.
What parallels? And those are the seeds. Those are the sacrifices. Just as you said, from 6 years old, I bet you guys were in there helping as well.
Well, yes. From, I would say 7 that I remember, I would, on weekends and Saturdays, my dad, he would allow us to come to the store to work on the weekends so that on the Saturday, so he could go home and have a nap. And so,
Same.
and so it was a 2-hour time period. And the 4 of us would have specific roles. My role was to reload the Coca-Cola machine, to restock the ice cream box. We had a stamper that you set with prices on, and so I had to set the stamper and then go and stamp all the products in the store on the shelves.
Absolutely.
You remember that too?
Absolutely.
And so, I worked from that point, from age of 7. And then
And
as he
these
grew,
are the roots that we sometimes do not see that create the trunk and the trees and the fruits that we enjoy today.
That's exactly
Love
it.
that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more how Louis and Steen's, it's incredible history, that you've come from, but tell us specifically how the Louis and the Steens evolved over these 25 years from that grocery store, the first black-owned grocery store, in a black community.
in the community, coffee was always something that every household had. And we loved coffee. Everybody loved coffee. And so we grew up preparing coffee for our father. Now, of course, we couldn't drink coffee. But my dad would come in every evening from work, and he would say to my mom, my mother was Ernestine, and so he would holler from the room and say, Ernestine, tell one of those gals to give me a swallow of coffee. One of our drinks we call a swallow, because my dad called it a swallow of coffee. And that swallow was really a very small amount of coffee, which was really espresso.
Yeah.
And so that is where we, from there, we just, it was always in me that I wanted to have a market, a store.
Interesting.
And
Fantastic.
so I'll jump in. So
Yes,
my,
please
my
do,
mom
Quinn.
and my dad, the same, upbringing that my mom had where she had to make coffee for my parents, my brothers and I. We all had to make coffee every evening for them after dinner. And so we grew up in the house making coffee. We couldn't drink it, obviously. We would sip a little bit.
That was going to be my question, right?
We would sip a little bit of it. And so we just, from a very young age, we all became a coffee family. Before the big brands became household names, this was our lifestyle growing up, just serving coffee, enjoying Cajun Creole foods in our household. And whenever we would have guests over, my mom would always make gumbo or etouffee, shrimp and grits, classic Louisiana dishes that just are not available in the Bahamas. And so people would always say, you have to share this with more people. And so over the years, we always talked about doing a family business together, but we all had our own different goals and visions and lives. And so the timing was never right. And so when it was meant to happen, that's when it did happen. And so right. My brother, who actually worked at Bahama during the beginning phases, he was always pushing us to come together to make this business that we talked about. And so, he really pushed everyone to come together. He moved home from Philadelphia. He was working there for about 10 years in the US. He's an electrical engineer. And so he met his wife here at Bahama, Tara Bastian, now Tara Russell. And so when everything just fell into place, when they were dating, when they were talking and then getting married, they all were just kind of pushing us all to come together. And so I was away working in the US. My parents were in Grand Bahama, and my brother just, created that vision and celebrated our grandparents, Louis and Steen. And 2016, we found our first location, and that's where we started.
What an amazing amalgamation of talents, of stories, of history that created Louis and Steen's.
Yeah.
What I'd like to add to that, though, is that I challenged my son, who was an MBA, to put together a business plan. Now, this is the business side of me coming in. Because in business, you have to have a strategic plan.
Right.
You have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so with an MBA in finance, I challenged him to put together a business plan, and I will review it. And once he presented the business plan to us as a family, we said, let's go, let's do it. It made sense. The numbers made sense, the plan made sense, and there was no specialty coffee in the Bahamas. We saw a niche market.
Wow.
We created a vision for this market. And what we did was we qualified ourselves. We went and trained ourselves in the specialty coffee business. The entire family went off to the US. My oldest son became a certified coffee roaster.
Really? Is there such a thing?
By the US,
Oh, yeah.
US Coffee Association. And my middle son, who was an electrical engineer, he became a certified technical troubleshooter on equipment. So what we did was we made ourselves very self-sufficient and qualified before we opened the door.
Yeah.
You perfected the art of the business.
Yeah.
That is correct.
And what you did was you were not afraid, as you will find in family businesses, to do the nitty-gritty to make the extraordinary things happen.
Correct.
And so as a family, as the Butlers, just as you all were serving, your mother was working from the time she could see over the counter, and we were brought into the stores. This is what people don't get. And the sacrifice of leaving very lucrative careers
Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah,
to
because-
come into something that you're going to build a brand.
A startup.
A startup that is recognized, and now probably the most outstanding cafe. I understand on TripAdvisor.
It's the number one
Definitely.
coffee house in the Bahamas.
Absolutely. Outdoing, the other big brand that we know of.
Yeah.
That's
But
correct.
family business.
Yes, and this is no accident because Annie Russell, my mother, was a pioneer as an entrepreneur. In the late 60s, she saw an opportunity. She was a registered nurse, but she decided that she wanted to help the young children in the neighborhood, and she opened up an early childhood education school. Now, what was interesting was this. She went and got herself trained as an early childhood education teacher, from a nurse to a teacher. And if you go through the names of the kids who went to Annie Russell School back in the early 60s, you'll be amazed where they are today. I'll just drop some names. Obie and Michelle Penland, Cardwell Brown, Dr. Cardwell Brown, the Honorable Glennis Hannah Martin.
Okay.
Now listen, now, do you know who their parents were at the time?
Yeah.
And so Annie Russell attracted the 35-year-old professionals
Yep.
who were just moving, before independence, who were professionals. She attracted that group of individuals. They trusted Annie Russell
Yeah.
With their children.
with their children
That's right.
because she was a nurse, but she had integrity.
Absolutely.
And she built this early childhood education, which still exists today. My sister runs, and my sister-in-law runs the early childhood education, Annie Russell Kindergarten. And also my niece has an early childhood education school in the West. So that's third generation
Wow.
that came from Annie Russell.
And these are the stories that we want to be able to tell, to reveal, to share,
Yeah.
so that we can inspire generations that come after us and how they can build their legacies. And so when you share that story of how you came up, how your parents started, and your mother as an educator, your father in a brick business, your mother as a nurse, and then later a trained educator. It's amazing to see how they actually interwove all of these things to get us to where we are today.
Yeah.
I want to just add this, though. In addition to that, Annie Russell partnered with Dr. Doris Johnson, and they formed the Early Childhood Education Association in the Bahamas to oversee all of the nurseries and the early childhood education schools in the Bahamas. And they wrote the curriculum, and they wrote the framework. The Bahamas government is using that right now, the Ministry of Education. And as a result of that, Annie Russell was awarded the MBE from the government of Bahamas for her work in this business.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Because when I started school, actually, generally we started at the age of 5 or 6.
Right.
And so you see now where the Bahamas has made mandatory that we have early childhood learning centers where kids are introduced to socialization and playing together and the fundamentals of the beginning of education through early education. And so it harkens back to pioneers such as Annie Russell and Dame Doris Johnson, who we're still celebrating today.
Yes.
So we thank you so much for sharing that with us, because these are the building blocks upon which we have built our houses, if you will, upon whose shoulders we stand today.
Correct.
5 generations out.
Correct. And I just want to highlight my grandparents, Louis and Steen. My grandfather, he had a 3rd grade education, but when he finished his life, he was a very successful black man. He built many communities. He built many single-family homes.
He was a pastor.
He was a pastor as well. He gave loans to black families.
He financed and built homes.
Yeah. When black families couldn't even
Go to the
walk
bank
into the
and get
bank.
loans.
And he was so well respected that color it mattered, but they respected him so much that he was able to do business with anyone. And his education didn't deter him from getting to where he got. He had a determination to be who he was.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In what year was your father born?
My father?
Yes.
Your father, yes.
1926.
1926. Okay, so he was in that
Jim
era.
Crow.
That's right.
Segregation.
That's right. He was exactly in that era. Sir Milo was 20 years ahead of that. But the parallels, the drive,
The
the,
exact same.
the civil activism,
Yes.
the fact that they're able to work hard, save,
Yeah.
and then turn around to help other
To educate
black
and empower.
persons. That's
Right.
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 Those are the stories that just parallel and mirror each other so well.
Yeah.
That brings the Russell and the Butler family so closely
So incredibly
together.
close together.
He had a strong wife also.
Oh.
let's talk
And
about it. Yeah.
Ernestine was educated.
We
She had
need
a
to put you on
master's.
all episodes of the podcast.
She had a master's in education. So you see the support system he had.
My
Absolutely.
mother got a master's at the same time that I got my BS.
Wow.
We graduated together.
Together. Incredible.
She was a
My-
determined woman.
Right. And my father, see, back at the time, my mother, when she was probably in about 11th, 12th grade, at that time, if you were like head of the class,
You became a
student in the
monitor
class,
or something.
You became like a teacher. You were teaching. And so at a certain time, they allowed teachers, those persons who had done that, those years were given as credit.
I see.
And so my father, who worked, as he said, a third grade education, but he was a visionary, a very smart man. What he did, he made sure my mother went back to university to get her degree.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so she became an educator. And actually, when I was in high school, by the time, adolescence, I would say, adolescence, high school, I had worked, my mom was a business person as well. She was a teacher, but she was a business person. Because with the church, she was always raising monies for various ministries.
Yep.
So when she's raising money for the ministries in the church, that means we have to work.
Exactly.
She would sell dinners, catfish dinners on weekend, fried chicken dinners on weekend, brownies, sweet potato pies.
Oh, yeah. Pecan candy. Yeah.
But the church was an integral part of the socialization process that grounded us as well.
Yeah.
But looking at all of those components, looking at how you actually instilled in your children their own professional careers, and it comes back full circle now to how do you manage? Because you've told us about how you got to where you are as different professionals, all in your own rights. But how do you manage this now in your family business, in a family setting, with everyone having, if you will, a strong academic, intellectual achievement in a different discipline?
Let me respond to that. We have three sons. One is a PhD. He's a professor at the University of the Bahamas, but he's involved in the business.
Okay.
Our second son has an MBA, and he's an electrical engineer. And Quinn is an architect. And they all were working in their own profession. And once we made the decision and we made the call, they bought into the vision. Now, this vision of getting into the family business, into the coffee business, they knew about that vision 20 years ago.
It was communicated.
Yeah.
It was
You
communicated.
know me, because I was always
A
researching,
dinner every
studying,
night. Every night we talked
preparing
about
at
it.
home.
Every
And so they were hearing.
At the
And I
dinner
think that
table-
is so important.
Yeah,
At
it
the
was a
dinner
seed
table,
dropped.
Hearing it.
every night they would hear, we're going to get into our own business. So, and so when I made the call, you see, they realized that they could maximize their purpose in the family business and achieve their goals and build a legacy in their business. And so that's why they all came in
They came back.
and
They
joined.
returned home.
They returned.
They returned to the Bahamas.
My oldest son was a professor at FAMU.
Yeah.
Okay.
My middle son was a engineer
Rockwell.
at Rockwell International,
Automation.
Fortune 500.
Yeah.
Wow.
Quinn was working with the largest architect firm in South Florida.
The Architectonica, who designed Brickell City Center,
Okay.
American Airlines Arena, all the skyscrapers downtown. in
Quinn was
South
working
Beach.
there.
My
But they all
goodness.
came home
One by one.
and they
start
bought
up.
into the vision. They
The
bought into,
vision.
They bought into the vision. So the vision will succeed when I go home to meet with the Lord and my wife. Vision in this family will always live.
But I will say it's beyond the vision. The only way to plug that vision in is you have to see someone doing it. So my parents, they haven't mentioned, but they are entrepreneurs individually.
Yeah.
Even before we created Louis and Steen's, my mom, she founded the first special education school in Grand Bahama. That
Alternative education.
that was ahead of its time because in the 90s, children, if you had learning disabilities, mild to moderate disabilities, you just fell in the back of the class. People would call you all
Or
kinds
they
of
hid
different...
you away at
Yeah,
home.
yeah. So these were
Most in Grand
like
Bahama, they
dyslexia.
thought that special education meant that you were mentally retarded.
Yeah.
So no school
see.
wanted special education
I
programs.
got you.
Yeah.
And so,
So people, when she opened that school, there were so many of my friends from Sunline and from Discovery that they learned differently and they felt maybe ashamed. They went to that school, got up to par, and then they were streamed back into different public and private schools.
You just needed to identify their methodology of learning
Correct.
so that they
Correct.
could reach their full potential.
Yeah. Correct.
And your mother was able to zoom in on that for them.
And
sure.
as an American coming into a foreign country, it was not the easiest
Thing
thing
to do, right.
get people to believe in her vision because she's not from here.
But she also demonstrated this strong vision when she shared with you, when her and Larry determined that we are going to create a family business.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is the importance. And therein lies also the importance of the influence of that strong female,
Presence and
Oh yeah,
absolutely, in our
100%,
families.
100%,
And you also
yeah.
mentioned sitting around the dinner
dinner
table.
Yeah.
Yes.
Communicating,
And
checking in,
communicating.
talking. Yeah.
And a lot of people lose the fact that in families, there are so many different things that people are looking at, but there's one thing that unifies us. We all have to eat.
that's for sure.
That's
for
true.
sure.
So why not eat together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we eat together, we talk together.
Absolutely.
One of the things I want to mention also, I met my wife in university, and I always wanted to come back to the Bahamas and open my own engineering company. But I wanted to get proper training. And so after university, I went to work for a Fortune 500 company called Honeywell International. I was an engineering manager in the aerospace and defense group. But I always wanted to come back to the
we
Bahamas.
were there for like 14 years
14
before
years.
During-
we came back to
During the
Bahamas.
Cold War, right?
And I said to my wife, we're going back to the Bahamas because I had two objectives. I wanted my 3 sons to grow up as Bahamians.
I got you.
And I wanted to open my own engineering company. So we moved back to the Bahamas to Freeport, and I got a job with Syntex Pharmaceutical as the engineering manager. Back in the 80s. We moved back in 87. And in 97, I opened up my own engineering company in Freeport. And my sons worked in the business when they were in college.
Awesome.
And so
Fantastic.
my oldest son, he worked for the company. Davin, who was an engineer, worked for the company. So they were working in the company.
I got a question.
But
Quinn
what my dad
actually
did, what he didn't
worked
mention,
in Louisiana.
I worked with.
I sent because he was interested in architecture, and my family had construction business. We sent him in the summers to Louisiana to work. in
So was it
the field.
mandatory to work in a family business or?
No,
was it
definitely
more
not.
suasion?
We wanted to. No, we wanted to. But what my dad didn't mention is the company that he founded is an international engineering firm out of Scotland, and so they sent over their firm because they were building the container port. They're building all
I
the
see.
cranes. So he works for this company, and he worked under foreigners
Yeah.
who were less experienced, less qualified, and he worked his way up, and he ended up buying the company.
Ah.
And so his company, he created from the ground up because he moved up.
Your
he
dad's
moved up
modest
and
in how he's telling the
His
story.
that's for sure.
so he didn't
That's for
mention that
sure.
part.
You
but,
know?
Yeah, but he moved his way up and took over.
So here we go. We have Louis and Steen's. We have a grocery store business back in Louisiana. We have an architect business,
Engineering.
an engineering business. Sorry. In our family, we went from
We
raising livestock.
selling ice,
Selling ice.
selling liquor, getting into nightly entertainment,
Correct.
renting houses.
Oh, we
I
did
mean,
that
just
too.
doing every manner of things that entrepreneurship encompassed.
So my question is, there's this parallel between our families. Is this entrepreneurship instinctive? Are you born with it, or How is this cultivated? Because this is a phenomenon I think many enterprising Bahamians and others who listen to the audience want to understand. Where does this curiosity for business come from?
I think it's both. I think it's environmental. I think seeing my grandparents, I had the fortune to see them in their element, working, like my mom said, raising funds for the church, just being entrepreneurs. I saw that with my grandparents on both sides, Bahamian and American, and then seeing my parents doing their own startups. I think that can only affect, a young person growing up in a positive way and instill in them that same drive and passion. However, I also think that's where that could stop. You have to be a successful, continuous entrepreneur, you have to fight. It's every day something happens, and you have to, maintain your vision and your dedication to the idea. And so, some people, maybe they can't handle that, or they just want the security of a 9-to-5, because there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of setbacks that you might have.
But you use the word fight because sometimes there really are fights, fighting of the wills, fighting, really
Even in
how are we
design,
going to move forward? I think the family dynamics, there is always
100%,
a fight.
100%. I'm a trained architect. My brother and my dad, they're trained engineers. My brother's a scientist,
a
scientist at the core. So sometimes our ideas, slam like that.
Absolutely.
Especially when you have a visionary.
Absolutely. And I think that is so important because, before you get to that actual end result, there's a lot of wrangling, a lot of back and forth, a lot of differences in opinions and the way forward. And I don't think people get that. They always think it's an easy road.
No.
It's not an easy road, and it's not all a bowl of roses.
Correct. And then when you get the reception from the public, some people will just love what you do, and then there are people who absolutely hate it. And when that first bad review comes, or that first, gapsy that you might hear someone say something, it's like a dagger to the knife. You've created this vision, it's your child, and you release it to the world. So you have to really be strong, because if you let outside factors, determine how you see yourself and how you want your business to operate, you'll be fear-stricken, and you won't do it. So you have to,
So another thing that I see parallels in, though, is that you've got a strong Christian foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of our families generally, the church was such a huge and integral part of who we are as human beings, that we do realize that the principles of Christianity is what actually keeps us together, especially when there are outside forces trying to tear you apart.
Correct.
And I think that's also, Pastor Miles, I've been at BFM many years myself, and I always remember him talking about, making your passion, starting your passion even through church, whether that's selling cookies or bread, because that's really where you create the value, right? By actually testing whether this passion is really entrepreneurship. And I hear that coming through loud and clear, that this service to church is actually the first testing of your passions, right? And I think people feel like you wake up tomorrow morning and you decide you can be a banker or open a bank or whatever it is that your vision is calling for. So, that's the one thing that I think is another parallel, Loretta, for us. But one of the things I want to talk about, Quinn, and, to both your parents, is talk to me about how the conflicts get resolved. Because if you have a visionary in your brother, and I hear your mom specifically say, this is the problem when you have a visionary like your oldest brother. I heard that emphasis. Let's talk about, how do we deal with conflict resolution, and what impact does it have, particularly on, sibling rivalries, relationships, whatever you want to describe them.
I think it comes down to, really how we were raised. Even though we might go off track and we have our arguments or we have our disagreements, business, it continues. When that time comes to open the door, the problems have to be pushed away or resolved. And so I think, we are all just dialed into making our vision what we set out for it to do. And so we just have that in our nature, from the Russells, from the Carters. My grandparents from Louisiana are Carters. And so they always came back together as a family. You know?
Well, I'm so glad you guys were able to do that because I
It's
can tell
not
you, my
easy.
family.
It's not
Let
easy.
me tell you some of the
Don't
challenges
tell
we
all
have.
our
Yeah.
business,
You know,
right? But you can give a little snapshot.
No, I got to tell you. Well, I'm the first.
Yeah.
Or I'm
Absolutely.
the oldest.
Absolutely.
And I think I should do this.
Yeah.
And you know, you get this sort of dynamic interplay with family members who seem to think because of their position in birth,
Correct.
that they have
The only ideas.
But
they
it's-
have
but the thing is,
the
it's-
and the
yeah.
best.
I think what
yeah.
we've done also as a family in this business is we have defined
Our roles.
our roles.
Yeah.
That's critical. This is our president.
Mm-hmm.
He is the overseer. I'm a vice president. I oversee purchasing and also
Recipes.
the recipes.
The dishes, working with the head chef.
Work with the head chef. Quinn is our marketing director, our visionary. Davin is he works over finance and operations.
Yeah.
Tara, his wife, she has a degree, an MBA also in personnel
HR,
and
yeah.
HR. So, and our eldest son, Larry Jr., he is a scientist, so he's over quality
Control.
management.
That
quality
is
control.
amazing.
creation as
So,
well.
And I see Franklin laughing because you know when we transitioned from generation 2 to generation
Generation
3, we do not believe that in the Butlers we had that well-defined role position, if you will.
Absolutely.
That has helped us a lot.
And so, you know, when you talk about organizational charts and job descriptions and stuff, in families, I
We
think
often take those
We
for
have
granted.
job descriptions.
absolutely,
We have
and,
job
and
descriptions.
that is key.
Yeah.
That
But
is key.
That's the business coming out of me because that's what I started out with.
I got you.
As an engineer, we are very structured. And so one of the things that was important was to have defined expectations and roles in the family business. And so everybody knows their lane and
Yeah.
they have to stay in their lane. And there's cross-pollination and so forth. And we have disagreements, but you know, in business, we like to have consensus. But when the chairman says this is the direction we're going in,
And
that's the
he's
direction.
chairman.
Love
we
it.
go.
Love it.
And that's what happens.
And
Yeah.
so,
You know, when
But I think that
we
works well
discuss-
when mommy and daddy are present.
yeah,
Among
yeah.
siblings, you know,
It can. It can.
birth order matters
Yeah.
in a very different way because even your mom saying your brother's a visionary, that carries weight, right?
Yeah.
Because now
Yeah.
mommy always says, I was a visionary.
Yeah.
And mommy ain't here to,
Yeah.
to massage
Correct.
that visionary's imprint on
Yeah.
the business in the way that,
Yeah, I think it's just because we're all different but similar. So I know what my strong suits are, and so I bring that to the table. And what I can do, my dad or my brother might not be able to do the same or bring to fruition the same way that
could
people
probably-
love.
But
Yeah.
for other families listening to this podcast today and wanting to take a lesson away as to how they can build what you have built, how the Butlers have built, and other families like us, I think we've hit on a very important point, and that point being that you know everybody has a defined role.
Right.
They know what their role is. In chaos, you're going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
yes.
But by having a defined
Structure.
organization and structure to
Understand.
everything, there will still be problems,
Yeah.
but you will know who is going to solve a particular problem
Yeah.
and how it comes
We
together.
recognize we're competing with the big boys.
Okay.
And so you can't come without a strategic plan. You have to come with a plan. You have to be structured if you're going to compete in the market.
Yeah.
And so we realize that we have to have structure
Yeah.
to be competitive. And I didn't mention our vision, but our vision is this. To be a specialty coffee house, a local specialty coffee house with a global vision,
Wow.
brewing love in every cup. Now, when you brew love in every cup, that means you
You
have
gotta live that thing.
You have to live it.
That's the part. That's the
You have to
hard
live it.
part.
You have to live it with your customers, and that's why we're
live it with
number
each other.
one.
And with your
We're number one on TripAdvisor is because if you read our reviews, I would guarantee 90% of the reviews talks about our customer service.
Wow.
See, so we brew, so we live our vision on a daily basis. And it generated from the family. There's a lot of love in this family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because right from your very first coffee house, I mean, even your strategic locations.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
They've been very intentional.
Yes.
Correct.
I think sometimes people go into businesses and they don't, first of all, they don't do their market studies.
Correct.
Yeah.
They don't look at their environs.
Yep. Yeah.
They don't look at, what sort of atmosphere it is they want to create to reach that level of success. But, from your very first coffee house, the location,
Was
just
phenomenal.
overlooking the ocean,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
You look back at Sir Milo Butler, I don't know what vision he had, but as a black man going onto Bay Street
yeah.
back in those days
What a statement.
was absolutely visionary.
Yes.
So
Correct.
location, prime real estate, that's what
Absolutely.
you selected. Right now, you're obviously in one of the hottest areas in terms of location.
And development.
You're in the airport industrial park area where there's a lot of vibrancy, lots of youth, lots of motion, lots of movement, lots of interaction with visitors and locals.
Correct.
So I think it's really, really important that when you look at all of these factors, this is what goes into making you the success that you are.
Yeah.
So I got one question. When does the business end and the family start?
And that's the business.
It's all intertwined.
It never
No.
ends.
It's
We go
always-
We do family vacations, we do dinners together, but really, we talk about all kinds of things, but we also talk about business all the time.
We have family dinners every week.
Okay.
Every week.
Every Sunday.
We
yeah.
meet as a family.
Everybody?
Everybody.
Yeah.
Wow.
Everybody.
And now our grands.
And our
Interesting.
grand. And we discuss family, but a business item might come up and we will address it.
Good.
We take family vacations. The whole family went to
So
Louisiana.
everybody goes?
Everybody goes.
Everybody.
We shut the business down,
Okay.
or we allow it to stay open,
Yeah.
depending on the timing.
Yeah.
But we operate as a family in all areas of our lives,
And I think,
Fantastic.
and that's very important. Very important.
Yeah. Outside, I know a lot of people are weary of family businesses, but because of the dynamics and because of the fallout, but at the same time, it's like, it's you against the world. And who better to be against the world than with your family? If you come from a family that is connected. And I think the upbringing, I come back to that, that's what centers us because, this is your blood. You can't go against, you can't let that go. So it's very important to us, and so that's why we always come back to the vision because the vision is family centered.
One of the things I hear in what you say is this idea of mindset. And the mindset that we are not the biggest, we are not entitled, we are up against
Yes.
the establishment.
Yes.
And so this is our fight. That's really what that grocery store
Yeah.
meant in Louisiana.
100%.
That's what Sir Milo's store over the hill was like. Listen, from Bay Street to over the hill, St. Jolly want me on Bay Street, we are not anti-establishment, but we got to make sure take on the establishment
Correct.
to recognize that we got to be twice as good. Because
Correct.
I think that's also what get lost as the dynamics of the family. I think certainly in our environment, there's a sense of entitlement creeps up because now you're a big fish. We come from the Milo Butler legacy,
Correct.
as opposed to appreciating. Listen, there's a whole world that's happening outside of us, and we got to be wary of the outsiders, not the insiders,
that's right.
and rewriting our story. And I think this is really what this podcast gives us an opportunity to do, to tell our stories and to give other people an opportunity to look. Listen, our legacy ain't just a business. Our legacy is this ability to tell these other stories of Sir Milo's life and to engage with the Russells and to hear the parallels of your journey and ours, because a lot of people look at their suffering today but don't recognize that that is actually their blessing for tomorrow.
Oh, that's powerful.
That's,
Yeah.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that maybe sometimes, I mean, that was so well said, that we, and I know you've brought this to the fore many times, we sometimes don't want to endure
Absolutely.
the suffering.
Yeah.
To get to the end result. The saying is that the darkest hour is just
Correct.
before
The
the
dawn.
sunrise.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets so dark in your struggle, in your suffering, you almost want to give up.
Absolutely.
But what gives us that drive to continue on to the success?
Well, that's
my mom
and
lands.
that's a good. I mean, that's reality.
Yeah.
And people just they just see the end product.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of struggle we went through at Louis and Steen's.
And we continue.
And we continue
To go
Yeah.
through challenges.
Yeah.
But you have to have a vision and you have to have a passion for what you're doing. And once you have a passion, the struggles are just, they're just struggles.
Yeah.
They
Par for the
just
course.
make you
Daily
stronger
occurrences.
to stay the course.
Yeah.
And you know, as an entrepreneur, you have to take a risk.
Yeah.
You can't be risk neutral
Yeah.
or risk adverse.
Yes.
You have to take some risks.
Yeah.
And sometimes but it has to be calculated risk.
Yeah.
Okay?
With business plans and strategic plans, as you said.
You must have strategic plans and business plans. And you have to have a good financial foundation
Yeah.
when you're doing business. Two things I would recommend anybody going into business: have a good accountant and have a good lawyer.
Yeah.
When you're getting into business, you need those two things, those two individuals, or those two
Skill sets.
yes, are important in terms of establishing the business, in terms of understanding the numbers. Because there's so many businesses go out of business because they don't understand the numbers. They don't
Yeah.
understand, they don't have appreciation for the numbers. And that's a good way of going out of business.
Yeah.
Especially, just to draw it back, because one of the challenges we see are generational businesses in colored or black families.
Yes. Yeah.
And we both come from black family backgrounds, building
Correct.
this generational business, generational wealth, sustainability. And I think that what you have said is important. The fundamentals of business, the sacrifices, the values through legal frameworks,
Yeah.
if you will. We must ensure that our black people, because I mean, sometimes you say, well, there's the color privilege and everything. Sometimes we don't have that privilege.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have adversity where we're shut out because of our color.
Yeah.
And how important is it for us to be that much stronger and more resilient to continue on for these generational things? Because there are many businesses that have withstood generations, but there are very few of color
Correct.
that have done it.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know that 70% of family businesses, they fail after the second generation,
Yep.
and 90% fail after the third generation.
Yep. Yep.
So
It would be interesting to see how many, in terms of our ethnicity, how that failure
Yeah.
rate
Yes.
translates as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Because, we may say in the Bahamas, oh, black crab syndrome, but it's a very real syndrome.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is a very real thing.
Yeah.
And so even when we started this podcast, we don't want to be racial in any which way, but we want to demonstrate to the majority of our people in the Bahamas around the world that black people can make a success of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
And that black people can go up against these huge established companies that have been around with lots and lots of money for
Capital.
many generations.
Endless. Yeah.
And that's what we recognized when we started the specialty coffee house in the Bahamas. And that's why we went with a specialty coffee, because we were the first. We were a pioneer in that area.
Yeah.
Because the other guys were not a specialty coffee
Correct,
house. They're
correct.
just a coffee house.
Correct.
And we became certified as the American Certified Coffee Association. And we introduced the first drive-through coffee shop in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
We introduced an app-based pay-as-you-go coffee shop.
Yeah.
And so
Fantastic.
we were
You were innovators.
Absolutely.
Pioneers,
Pioneers
trailblazers.
in the area of the coffee specialty business.
And it's interesting as we talk about the sustainability of black businesses. It's important because we realize, and I hearkened a little bit to the black syndrome, the black crab syndrome, but in every ethnicity, you find that they support their own. And we sometimes are not confident enough as Black people to want to support
each
our
other.
own.
Yeah.
So when you see a Louis and Steen compared to one of the imported brands, which is probably of, you know, a different ethnicity, how do you withstand and stand up and stand tall and still be number one as that Black enterprise that is doing well and successful?
Well, I'll start. I want to share just one story that my mom shared with me about my grandmother, Ernestine. You know, she got her MBA, but she was a teacher when desegregation happened. My mom told us how she taught at this school that was a desegregated school, but there were still relatively no Black kids there. It was a slow transition.
It was a town that was all white.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my grandfather said to her, just go back to the Black school, teach there. But during that time, those schools were not funded, they were poorly managed, they were just shambles. And so my grandmother, she was placed in that school, and she said she's not leaving. You know, she had the option to leave, but she didn't leave. And every day they would accost her with all kinds of racial slurs. They slashed her tires.
They call her home.
They called the home.
Threaten.
Yeah.
Threats.
So for me, hearing that and being raised by my grandmother, every summer we would go. Particularly me, I would always go. So I have no choice but to, be a strong Black entrepreneur. But I never see myself as this is a Black-owned business. I want to be the best business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to be the best business. And
color should not play a role in it.
It does, though. It does.
But the point is the fact that you're able to create a brand that whoever comes in there, it doesn't matter the color of the ownership, but it's a world-class product.
People
that is important.
They've come in, and then when people, because at the Bahamas, people like to know who owns things.
It. Then they realize
they're shocked that this is a Black-owned business.
I've been in businesses like that I've been affiliated with.
Shocked.
Because, and this is,
the standard.
It's a difficult subject to talk about.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we always think of ourselves as that second-tier citizenship, that second-grade professional.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so when someone comes in and goes, "Oh, does a white person own this business?"
Yes.
That's the question that you don't want to say, but that's what they're asking. And
They've asked the question, who are you fronting for?
I see.
We've been asked.
See, they've asked
In the
question,
beginning, that's what people.
who are you fronting for?
It has to be an
and
investor
we just
behind
smiled
it,
and we
you
said,
know?
well, we're not fronting for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, this is what we want to draw out
And
of
this is what we
this,
want others to
because
hear.
we want people to understand that these are the measuring sticks.
Yeah.
That when you create a world-class product, no matter who you are, people don't expect that to come from someone of our hue.
Correct.
We've got to change that.
Yeah.
100%.
We've got to change that, and we've got to show that we mean business and that we're going to sustain this.
Yeah.
So Quinn, what I hear from you is it ain't about being Black.
Yeah.
It's all about Black excellence
Yes.
and having a degree of excellence
Correct.
that really causes people to say, listen, we could set the standard.
Absolutely.
We
I love
have.
that.
Absolutely.
We really have. Like that's why I say, it's us against the world.
Yeah.
So it's not, I have to prove myself worthy because
You are worthy.
And it comes back to how we were raised. My parents always told us.
You don't need validation.
No, they put us in places and spaces that you didn't see us,
Absolutely.
And so with tennis and with schooling, all those things, gave us the confidence to say, we're here and we're going to run circles around you.
And we're not going to be ignored.
No, so that's, I think, as I said, it's the
amazing.
family unit and how you're raised and how you're exposed. And you don't need necessarily money for that. You just need a mindset.
And values. Isn't that the sort of thing that we were brought up in, Franklin? I mean, we were never told that we couldn't go anywhere.
Or that
we couldn't achieve anything.
Or that we were less than.
Yeah.
We never
Right?
knew
Because
that.
I think that is part of the challenge that when you come from our communities, we inevitably consume that we are less than because we're not allowed to go into certain areas. We're not able
history,
to exactly.
We have to let.
And I think this is why telling your story, telling our story, is so important because we need everybody listening to this podcast who of color who want to be an entrepreneur to recognize it. Listen, you ain't less than.
Yeah.
Your level of self-actualization means that you could do whatever you want to do.
Absolutely. And be the best at what you do.
It's your passion. It's the gift that God has, given to you. And it's hard work. You have
Yeah.
see,
It's
you
hard
can't
work.
think that you're going to start a business and let someone else run it.
Absolutely.
And you just leave.
It don't
Say
work.
that again. Say that again. Because a
more
lot of
time.
people think
For those
that's
at
the
the
way.
back.
That's right. And that's why
That's what a
businesses
lot of
fail.
people think.
Yeah.
They think, oh, okay, I've opened a
I'll
business.
open a
Now I'm gonna let
business
someone else run
and
it.
let somebody
And then
else
the
run it.
next thing, they have no business.
Yeah.
So, you have to be willing to sacrifice
Yeah.
and work.
Roll up your sleeves.
And what we
Yeah.
do in the business, we train. We train. And, we go through a lot of stuff. That's probably
Biggest
the
challenge.
most difficult part of being in business.
Because you cannot get a lot of people to understand the
And commit.
importance
Right.
of being at the
Right.
level where you
And-
need them to
and
be.
they are used to a certain culture.
Yeah.
And they want to bring that culture into Louis
No,
and
no, 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 no,
Steen's.
no, no,
And
no.
we
This
say
is how it's
no.
done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we have to keep the standards. And so many times, people, they don't want to work.
And you say, thank you
for us.
very much,
Right.
but
Yeah.
Next.
you just don't fit this.
And then when they walk out and they don't show up, then
You have got to be there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
Family members.
We jump
Absolutely.
in.
Jump
and
Do
in.
what you gotta do.
And we work the business
Yeah.
because
You have to run it.
we are skilled in the business.
And that is the key to success in family businesses because, you look at corporations where they have unions and people say, oh, I'm going to strike and I'm going to step out.
Yeah.
In family businesses where you may not have that many persons, when
show
the
up,
guys
you drive the
decide
truck.
that, hey, I ain't coming to work today, boy, listen, you better know how to do all the nitty
All
gritty.
the work.
You better know how to change the
And the minute
tire.
you do it, the less
You-
likely they are to pull a fast one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when they know that you could do it all,
Yep.
and they not only do they adhere, but they respect you as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So I want to just kind of shift gears and talk, we talked about some of the challenges of business, looking for support, but more so than support, you're really setting a standard of excellence as Black people in business, right? Really being able to redefine what excellence looks like, quite frankly, whether that's in the coffee shop business, whether that's in retail or real estate, whatever that is. And so it really asked me a question. So what is the biggest joy that you guys get for being in business? I know you guys can fill in when nobody shows direct, but surely that's not the most exciting part of the journey. Talk about some of your best times as a family in business and really what's kind of had the biggest impact on you guys as a family being in business.
I think for me, it does keep us unified as a family.
Okay.
And I really love that. Unity is, it's power.
Yeah.
And so that part is very important for me. We are unified. We are unified in business. We are unified when we're not in business. It keeps us unified. And that's a blessing. Also, I think that, I forgot the question.
No, what brings you the greatest satisfaction
Yeah, best.
and joy in having your family business?
Also, the greatest joy is when we create something, when we plan something, when we decide to come up with something new, a new idea, and then we see people come
And
and
love it.
enjoy
Love
it.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so that for
That
me,
positive
Powerful.
feedback,
Yeah.
which
It's
gives you
great.
the validation of success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, it is very simple. When I sit down and I look at my three sons, our three sons,
Yeah.
and I am imparting, I'm coaching,
Yeah.
I'm mentoring. For the past 40 years of experience in business, I'm passing it on.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the best joy that I could ever get as a father, as a businessman. To see our three sons sitting around the board table, and I'm mentoring them, and I'm imparting information on business to them, to take it on to the next, to even take it to the next level.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask this question. This is important to me. Knowing that you have an organizational chart, knowing that you have job definitions, and as you look forward to your growth, your sustainability, and obviously your vision to this point has been fulfilled, what exactly does the future of the Russell legacy look like?
Enterprises and legacy.
The enterprises. It may be Louis and Steens, it may be other things. Do you have any idea that you can share with us what the next stage is that you will be going into in your business, and how you plan to execute that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I will feel that question. In business, you have to manage growth.
Yeah.
You have to manage growth, because if you don't manage growth, you got to go to business.
Absolutely.
And so, what we have done, we've put together a strategic plan on growth. We're moving into areas. We want to move into the eastern part of the island. We're now predominantly in the western part of the island. We're talking with potential investors. We're looking at franchising. We've put together a franchising agreement already. We've had some discussions with individuals on franchising. So we are going to be expanding significantly in the Bahamas and outside the Bahamas. And we're discussing franchising with a family member in Chicago who understand Louis and Steen's brand. And so growth, but we want to make sure we manage our growth, because we want to maintain the quality of the product.
Right. That's right.
And the service that we because, see, in business, it just takes one bad apple. It will destroy the brand.
Yeah.
And so we got to make sure who we do business with and how we grow. But the future looks very bright.
So the quality control mechanisms must be in place.
Yes.
In other words, I mean, just as generic as some of the franchises that we know, you go into, you expect the same quality.
Yeah.
When you go into Louis and Steens over in Dubai next year, you want to know that you're having the same Louis and Steen quality that you're having at Old Fort Bay.
Correct.
That's correct. That's
Fantastic.
correct. We have a Louis and Steen at Rubus Gladstone Road.
You sure do.
And that quality is no different than the quality at Louis and Steen in the West. And Quinn actually runs that operation at Rubus in the heart of the
Service station.
in the heart of Nassau town.
Yeah.
Different clientele, but the expectation
Same
of
experience.
Same experience.
One thing to add to that, I find it amazing that we're actually in a service station, because that is where my grandparents started. The Carter's Grocery was also a gas
service
station,
station too.
and they served hot coffee and hot food.
And
so
a
now we're
gas
doing
station.
the same thing. So when I back to the question about what brings us joy for our business, when I walk into Market Orleans, that's our flagship, I'm just always amazed, because it's almost like an outer body experience sometimes. It's so beautiful, and I'm like, we created this, but it feels like someone else did it. I'm proud of it. And then the service station is a totally different concept, but it ties into the foundation of Louis and Ernestine Carter.
Great.
I love it. I love it.
One of the
love
things I
it.
want to just mention also, all of the branding of Louis and Steen was designed by Quinn. Everything was done in-house.
Fantastic.
In fact, Louis and Steen's
Every design, everything.
store was designed by Quinn, later by Quinn and Davin, my
Davin,
son.
who's an
And
engineer.
actually,
During
they did
all the lockdowns.
They did
So
they did the construction also.
it was
oversee the construction.
intense.
So a lot
Very
of stuff is
intense.
done in-house because they have the expertise.
And when,
Lori-
when you talk about disagreements, that construction, it was intense, because it was during 2020.
pandemic.
That's
In
their
August.
trademark intellectual property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the secret. What do we call this? 11 ingredients
11 secret
of
spices.
KFC. That's
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
And every family, every entrepreneurial family has some secrets
Absolutely.
that will be inherent to them.
And those are driven by those same values that you guys talked about. So, Loretta, what an incredible story.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, I have known all my life Annie Russell and everything, but I mean, to sit, and of course I've gotten to know Louis and Steens, which I love, but just to sit and hear the evolution of how you've come from, your beginnings, your embryo,
Yeah.
to where you are today as an outstanding company. We want to commend you.
Yes.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for being our
And
guest.
encourage you to keep on keeping on, man.
Yes, and we want other young and other families as well to take lessons away from this podcast today. So thank you for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
for having me.
opportunity.
Yeah, so, just for our guests who've been watching this podcast, we want to thank you guys for listening to this great episode of the Legacy Podcast. Again, before we wrap up today, Loretta, we got to thank our sponsors, of course, Echo here at the Current at Bahama. Thank you guys for this incredible venue. The Butler Legacy Foundation that continues to support our efforts to tell incredible stories that hopefully inspire and impact other families to do something about their own legacies. And so, to the Russell family, we want to thank you guys for being our guests and keep up the good work with Louis and Steen. Maybe one day we'll have you guys sponsoring our show as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And we just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And I want to thank Franklin for actually, getting me into this. I am so excited every time we get to do one of these podcasts. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Loretta. My day would never be the same without spending.
I love it. There
care.
you go.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yes.